The mic on this blew me away. Hey, I was this is a S23 or whatever, and
Is that like the newest one?
no, like it's it's getting 2 or 3 years old now. S22, S23 something. I took a video of a kangaroo in the backyard, and I was off in the distance, and they have this like directional microphone stuff in the Samsung. iPhone's probably got it too, and I could hear the kangaroo hopping in the video recording, and I'm like, how do they do that? So they have some like directional thing on the microphones where they can like single out the sound. Once you zoomed in, they can single out the sound from that part of the field and not like the periphery stuff. It's crazy.
Jesus, because I remember the handheld ones that had the 2 crossover microphones that would give you like proper stereo.
Yeah, it was like that, but like,
on your phone.
Yeah.
Wow. And how do you keep like? It seems like the things with these devices, the only thing that seems to upgrade is like the camera every time. There's obviously a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's like that's kind of what the main focus is to entice people to buy the next one.
It's funny because they just downgraded it in the new Samsung.
Oh, they downgraded the camera?
Yeah. So this has a 10 times optical zoom, and they've downgraded it to a 5 times with like AI enhancement stuff. So new phone comes with all this AI stuff. Whereas I don't care about that. I want to take good photos out of the it's still coming out of a phone. But so I'll probably take me a while to upgrade this because I'd rather have the 10 times optical zoom. Yeah.
I've always wondered how I don't know if this exists, but if you could have a device. So I just recently got into camcorders, the old school. There's something really, really fun about holding a camcorder, and you flip it open and it makes a boodling and you're ready to go, It's got that kind of nostalgic thing about it. It's very enjoyable to use. So I was thinking, what would be amazing is if there was some way that you could make a camcorder housing, but you use your phone as the brain for it. So if you could somehow slot your phone in and your phone opens up and that's the screen, but it's also the brain, but you get to hold it and you can do the zoom thing, so you get all the benefits of the camcorder but using the mind of the phone.
I was listening to the Petapixel podcast and they were talking about, they had a dude who he did a lot of the cinematography for like Power Rangers movie and maybe the new recent one, Origin. It was all shot on 16mm, like really stylistic sort of stuff.
Oh, really?
But he was saying, he said exactly the same thing. I wish that there was like some kind of rig that I could like slot my phone into and and maybe even I know Leica released a phone recently that has a slot for interchangeable lenses on it.
That's cool. I'm all about that stuff. I mean, I know it's probably pretty niche, but another one that I've thought would be rad is if you could have, like, I'd totally buy that with the lenses. So if you could get actual natural depth of field.
That's
and be a photographer with the camera that you always have with you, because that's what they're always saying is, the best camera is the one you have with you, which is your phone. But you can, I want some proper depth of field, not the digital depth of field. Another one is I would get a case that has a speaker on the back. Like even if it was chunky. If it had a good quality speaker with a bit of bass response, I would do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if they exist. Maybe you can find one from Alibaba or something in China.
I bought an amp that plugged into my phone. It had an extra battery in it, so it would help with the battery charge. But so I could use my studio headphones while I was out, like
nice. Nice. The audio file in you, you got to get that good quality stuff.
Your pocket's like.
I had this these earbuds. I think it was an Australian company called. What are they called? Neuraloop.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, have you used them?
No, I've heard about them, yeah.
Well, I was so intrigued. So there was the headphone version and then there was the earbuds version.
You tune them to your ears, right?
Yeah. So when you get them, you put them in and you push, you start the process, whatever it is, and you have to be in a completely silent room. Mm-hmm. And then it will play certain frequencies. And I don't think you have to do anything. You don't have to push, you don't have to say when you can hear it or not or anything like that. I think what it does is it plays a frequency, and then by the way that your ear works, your ear for some reason it kind of bounces the sound back. I think that's how your ear works. So it can read what frequencies you have distortions in where you can't hear, and it will bump them up so that you can then, when the process is done, you get this circle, and it turns into a blob of where your distortions are, so that it tunes it perfectly to your hearing. And it was really cool. It sounded amazing. But there was buggy issues with the device itself. Like I couldn't get it to charge, and they were a very new company, and they just sent out a new charger. It was really disappointing, because the technical side of things with the hardware was not good. But man, it was amazing. It was like I just sat and listened to music, like my favorite songs again for a couple of hours. I was like, man, I'm going to put on Back in Black, like the album that got me into rock music. I was like, start to finish, like, whoa, wow! You can hear there's those tones of like Malcolm Young's backing vocals in there that I've never heard before. It was all these little nuances that I'd never known. Yeah, it was very cool technology.
That's why for me it's like it's disappointing whenever if I go to show someone music somewhere that's outside of like where I would normally be listening to music, and it's like, it really just doesn't have the same.
Doesn't do it. It's like, what's that scene in that movie? Did you ever see I Love You, Man?
Yeah, this is the bromance.
There's a scene where he's trying to show his wife Rush. They're talking about Rush, the band, and him and his new friend, and she's like, I don't know what Rush is. He's like, you've never heard Rush? What are you talking about? And he goes, oh, here. And he's putting on Rush on his phone, and it's like, and she's like, oh yeah. He's like, no, it doesn't really have the same effect, but, and it's amazing how often that is the way that people listen to music, which is really sad, because as a creator, you sit there and you headphones on, like I've got the monitors and I've got headphones and I'm bouncing between different mixes, take it into my car, listen to the mix in the car, then the last one is I listen to it on the speakers out of my phone and go, well, it sounds all right. I guess I can hear the drums, So many people like, let's hear your new song. Boop.
So all you need to do is master it to sound great on the iPhone.
On the iPhone.
And then teens and everyone, you'll be in.
You're set. The TikTok mastering and you're good to go. Yeah, man. So you're in the tech world.
Yes.
Here on the Gold Coast.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. A funny story about that. I was so in like 2008, the company that I was in, it was actually based in Brizzy, but I was still working down here, ended up selling to Twitter. So it was a startup. I finished just before the deal happened. But after that, my brother was still there at the time, ended up selling to Twitter. They all moved to San Francisco and worked there for a while.
Oh, wow.
And but my local councillor, actually, he just won again, Glenn Tozer, GT, grats, mate. The first time I met him after he just won, I went round to his office just to say hello and, congratulations and stuff. And I was nervous as shit. Like I was, meeting a politician. And
it's probably not very common for people to be that starstruck about politicians.
Well, I'm a nerd, man. I was outside my office.
Yes.
And and it was just a thing. He was like, so wait, hold on, because people kind of knew about We Are Hunted as being this, because it was a music tech startup as well. That was really that's been a big consistent theme for me.
What's it called?
We Are Hunted. So we were taken on, we can get into it. We were taken on Billboard basically by creating an online digital chart, but it was like made out of what people were writing about in blogs and stuff, and became like a very indie-centric chart basically of what is hot right now on the web. Mm-hmm. And Twitter ended up buying it. And
this is just music, or this is just
music? Right. Yeah. And when I met Glenn, he was like, when he realized that I'd worked on that project, he was like, wait, someone in part of this like tech, local tech startup success story was like made in my division. And it's I've had the opportunities to move over to the US, but just I think this is such a great place to live, and it's hard to think about pulling the kids and in putting them in a different environment when we have and it's just easy. Yeah, so easy.
I mean, you were telling me that you listened to the podcast with me and my wife Laurel, and we've done the complete reverse. We were in the States, in LA, and realised this is not a good place to live. Lots of opportunity, very exciting, but it's not safe. It's not easy. Yeah. It's not cheap.
It's guys who've spent a lot of time there, they say they come back here and it's like they realise that they've all got this like ever-present fear, like just always, and it's like
just survival.
Relief.
You literally have I guess it's like, I mean, if you lived in the wild, an animal in the wild, depending on your environment, you would constantly be going, okay, what are my dangers?
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight. And it's literally like that, which is, you don't really realise it until you leave. It's just this low level constant anxiety of, am I safe?
Yeah.
Am I safe? And something that I realized, women deal with this a lot more than men do, it took me a while to actually figure that out. But it's like when you start dealing with that as a, I'm not a violent guy, but when you start to think quite often, is this guy behind me something I need to worry about?
Yeah.
And then you realize, women do that all the time.
Yeah.
Constantly, they're like, am I in physical danger? Because unfortunately, if it comes down to a physical altercation between a man and a woman, good luck.
There's been times when I'll be walking behind a woman like on the road or something, and I'm like, yeah, but it's me. I know, like, I'm in. If anything, I'm going to be looking out for her and make sure she's okay. And I'm like, but she doesn't know that. So I'll walk to the other side of the road.
I've done the same thing. Yeah, and I've even been in my own little world, had my headphones on, walking back somewhere, and I realize I'm behind some woman, and I check her look back to see if she's like, there's a guy behind me, and then you realize, shit, she's concerned for her welfare.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah, totally.
And then when you ponder that, it's So anyway, that was kind of the situation in LA. You come to the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
Obviously there are dodgy little pockets, but man, it's a beautiful place to live, beautiful place to raise kids.
Yeah.
I get it. Don't go. You can do what you're doing from here. Fuck yeah, man.
I'm sure my career would have progressed differently if I'd done that, but then I would have made compromises in other parts of my life. So, I feel like most of my career I've spent working remotely as well. So I think other people believe that I can do what I do from anywhere, basically. So a lot of the time that's just been from here. Yeah.
So let's get, if you can give me some specifics on what you are working on and what you have worked on and how you've gotten to where you're at.
Yeah.
Let's start with where you've come from.
Yeah.
What's something, because you were telling me you used to work with something like LinkTree, is that right?
I worked at LinkTree. Yeah, I worked at LinkTree.
Okay,
for a while,
so that's one that most people would know.
Yeah.
So
I was there fairly early. Yeah, not super early. I can't remember exactly how many engineers were there when I joined, but it was before things really took off. And so that was good. I mean,
so for anyone who doesn't know, LinkTree is the thing that when you go to someone's Instagram main page, you click on the link and then it takes you to LinkTree, so you can have 20 links.
Yeah, all your links together in one place. Yeah. So and I mean, hats off to Alex, the CEO. He's I don't know how public this story is. Anyway, we can fix it in post.
Yeah.
He Mike, who was working on the first version of the it was just this idea, right? And Alex, the CEO, had these relationships with like through the agency he was running with musicians and stuff, and he had this idea to build this thing, and he got Mike, the first guy who worked on it, to build like a proof of concept. And Mike was like, here, check out this first like version of it. And apparently the next, very shortly after that, Alex had Peking Duck using it, and I think Mike was like, it was just like a proof of concept. I wasn't expecting like anyone to.
Yeah, there's bugs. It's not ready. Yeah.
So I think Alex was like out there pushing it, and just I think having those connections in the industry, it just like blew up from there. And
that's a very useful tool. I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of other competitors that have ripped it off. And do you think that LinkTree was probably one of the first ones doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the way LinkTree puts it themselves is that they created the space. And I think that that's true.
So what were you doing at LinkTree?
I was, it's an interesting story there. So I ended up being politely asked to leave.
Did you? Let's hear the goss.
Yeah. Some of it I legally can't talk about, but
we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, that's it. The short version of it is I was probably put into a position that was a few levels too more junior than where I should have been, and that made a lot of people feel very uncomfortable. And
you included, I'm sure.
Actually, it gave me the opportunity to be really grassroots and like work together with the real people, like the other engineers in the teams and other teams, and like enabling other teams. So I like got some of my work done that I'm like most proud of technically in my career, and interestingly, like some of that was used as part of the reason to get rid of me as well. So it's it really gave me that opportunity to like work to be on the tools and to see where the pains were in a company that was growing really quickly and like struggling with this legacy of like the old original like all startups go through this. It's like they build the first version that just proves their right to exist as a business really. But then that becomes like a ball and chain that sort of holds you back as you start hiring other engineers who look at that and like, I don't want to work on that piece of shit. Like I want to work on the new thing. And like there's this tension around that where so much of the core value of the business is tied up in this thing that no one wants to touch, right? So I was like involved in helping make that more accessible and give people ways to add to the product without being tied to the ball and chain.
Okay.
So yeah, very rewarding work. Very like the talent acquisition people there. Like Mitch actually lives on the coast now. Just did an amazing job, and I've hired people from that pool of like people multiple times since then. And they're amazing people to work with. And yeah, there's a bit of there's always management problems in companies, but. Which I don't have where I am now, and I really love it. But we can get into that later. But yeah, I in the end, the company was like growing very quickly, going through a lot of change, and there just wasn't room for me in there. But yeah, it was nice to work there. I learned a lot about myself, and very diverse team as well. So like it's pretty unusual in software. Like tech has a real man problem, right? There's very few teams that have women even in them, let alone like a balance of men and women. So they really made a strong effort there to like hire in a more, there weren't quotas or anything, but like just to hire more diverse teams, gender, race, whatever. And
was it effective?
It was. Yeah, I think, I'm a firm believer that diverse groups of people have more experiences to draw on to make better decisions together and have more robust conversations. So
I absolutely agree with that, yeah.
That definitely happened in full effect there. I had to deal with a little bit of like, I think I probably I'd worked with like women as designers or women as like content writing, like copywriting and stuff, but like as engineers in a core team. I hadn't really worked with that before, and I wouldn't have ever thought that there was a problem, but I had like some high school insecurity shit that I suddenly started popping up, and I was like, wait, what is this? I'm married, I've got kids, like why am I thinking about this stuff? And luckily, I had some good people to help me through it, but it was like just from being bullied at school and stuff like that coming up and making me be like, this person could completely subvert my like ego and professional like sense of identity and all that sort of stuff, and like feeling really vulnerable because of it, and yeah, having to deal with that. And once I realized what it was, because I just felt vulnerable, right? I didn't know why. And I went to one of the women there and I said straight up, like, there's something that is like really intimidating to me, and I don't know what it is, but I'm going to go away and think about it. And luckily she was like really cool with it. Anyway, it took me about a day, and I was like, I figured it out. It's just high school, like being bullied and stuff, and feeling like I've gotten to a point in my career where there's so much like ego around your identity and stuff that feeling like someone could cut through all of that and just find your weakness and completely destroy all of it. And once I realized that, I was like, oh, well, that's dumb. And I can deal with that now. And it hasn't been a problem, but it was interesting for something like that to like pop up later on in life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's childhood trauma, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
We carry it with us whether we want to or not.
Yeah, I was a nerd then as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's so. Did you feel like you were kind of getting bullied by one of the women at work? Is that what it was?
No, not at all. Not at all. It was purely like, this is someone who I like respect, intellectually and professionally, and then I realized that I found that intimidating. It was like, that's like not very rational. Why?
Sure. Okay. It's interesting because I had a situation recently where I was doing a gig. My wife and I were doing the duo gig, and someone came up and said something really rude to us, really rude, and it was a woman, and then like Laurel said something to her, and she would continue to be rude and quite belligerent to her, and it was like really nasty. And I was thinking, man, if you were a man this would be a very different situation because I'm not gonna square up to some woman who's being rude. And it was just an interesting situation where I was like, man, I'm kind of getting bullied by some bitch. She was being a bitch, you know. She was just being really nasty. And I was like, oh, what? It was. Yeah, I wasn't going to start yelling a bit, but anyway, it's just an interesting dynamic how that is between males and females, and then males and females. Like I've just found, you know, doing.
She's like, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and I found that quite more often than not, the drunk people who are, because it's always drunk people who are, you know, rude and belligerent at gigs, are usually women.
Yeah.
They're like, I guess because they can get away with more. You know, some drunk dude, I think maybe even though he's drunk, his mates there's just this kind of thing like, I don't, you know, and again, I'm not a violent person. I've never been in a fight in my life, but it hangs.
Yeah,
it hangs there like we could fight.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not fighting. There's no one's fighting any women. I mean, there's a problem if a dude is starting to punch on with women. That's a much darker issue. Yeah, okay. So that's another thing that came to mind is the guy I was talking about before. One of my good mates works in the tunnels, and you know, you were talking about being on the tools, the digital tools, and he's on, you know, the physical tools, and he was saying how I think that they don't do that thing with the quotas so much. With diversity, because it affects the workflow.
Yeah.
One, because majority of the fact of the matter is I just don't think that there are many women who want to do that. They just aren't really interested in that line of work. And therefore there's probably even less women that are good at it because they are just, you know, constantly surrounded by men. And I don't think that these places hire many women because it causes problems with all the men.
Yeah.
So it can, like, you know, you put a woman or a couple of women in this drastically male-dominated environment, and it's like cat amongst the pigeons.
Yeah, and so much of it's interesting because in like tech teams, I mean, you know, the teams that I'm most familiar with, a really like healthy sign of like a team that's getting along well and like enjoying each other's company and like being productive and stuff is just like the in-jokes and like how everyone can like the banter, right? And sometimes the banter is like wholesome and funny and, you know, and whatever, and sometimes it's not wholesome and funny, right? And like in
there's a line.
Yeah. And in those situations, often it's like hilarious and you're there and whatever, but there's no women, right? It's just dudes doing dude stuff. And it's interesting to try and like the team that I'm in now with women and with different races and religions and everything. And it's like trying to build, especially in a remote team, trying to build that sense of like culture and the in-jokes and the fun and stuff without it resorting to the stuff that I've seen happen in the past as well. And it's interesting. I think in tech, like it's a generational thing as well. Like back in 80s or whatever it was, the Amigas and Commodore 64s and stuff. At some point, companies started just marketing them to boys, and what happened is like
what are these Amigas?
Oh, like the original computers, like home computers. Okay. Right? Yeah. So those systems were like programming was a big part of how you just interacted with the system. So like these boys were growing up from a very young age, learning how to code on these computers. Getting to uni and already having like 5+ years of coding experience. And because they've had these like products marketed to them as kids. And then women are coming in and joining uni at the same time and struggling to keep up because they are not at the same level. And I think it's just like become this perpetuated thing from there where it's just become so male dominated.
Well, it's probably both, isn't it? It's probably like that. It was marketed to boys probably intentionally because they knew that boys would be more interested. Yeah. But because it was marketed to boys, the boys were the ones who took it. Yeah. So you've got that majority of, obviously not all people who are going to be interested are boys, but if there's a young girl who's really into it, but all she sees in the marketing is boys doing it, she's going to be like, maybe that's not for me. Yeah. Even though if she'd started and had that 5 years in advance, she could be one of the best.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of self-perpetuating
And there's, it is starting to change. And there's like groups like, so Sarah Moran, she runs this group called Girl Geek Academy. And it's like they have published a series of books and run events and stuff. And it's all about like, the first book is called The Hackathon. And it's about these girls coming together and, becoming friends through this whole process, but having to come up with a like startup idea and making all the tech for it and stuff, which like you would only really have associated with like guys in the past, right?
Sure.
So yeah, they're sort of trying to normalize thinking about like techs and entrepreneurship and startups and stuff for women as well, but starting with the girls, because it's too late if you start later with women, because they've already had that like their whole life to that point dealing with a situation that's completely lopsided, right? So it's about getting the girls when they're young and like normalizing this stuff for them and making it okay.
Yeah. Finding the girls that are into it from an earlier age. Yeah. And which, I mean, it's probably going to be a smaller percentage, but that doesn't mean that small percentage can't be very talented at it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the like the person who's credited with creating the first computer programming language, Ada Lovelace, girl.
Yeah.
And there's like examples like that all through history where women have been the ones that have like done the foundational like change things that have really like moved tech forward. And sure, there's been plenty of blokes doing it as well, but like I think too often we don't hear about the fact that actually it's anyone who is interested, right?
Yes.
And good at it.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the by far the most important thing. It doesn't matter anything that you are, other than are you interested in it and are you good at it?
Yeah. I mean, the real conversation is a lot of the time historically this has come from people who've had the privilege of a good education and like financial backing and haven't had to work and like.
Yeah. If you're living in a hut trying to find clean water, you're not exactly going to be spending much time coding whether you're a boy or a girl.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So LinkTree. After LinkTree,
the company I was at just before this was an insurance company. So yeah, and then finished up there and moved into the company I'm at now, which is called CalcTree and another tree. I didn't want to join them. I didn't want to join. A friend actually placed me into this role, and I was like, I don't know that I want to go into another startup just yet. And he said, no. After the troubles that I'd had with management in the insurance company and at LinkTree, I just was super wary of like founders who are like really passionate about their industry but don't have a lot of like management experience and all that sort of stuff. And
it's a different thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and what happens is like founders have this business idea and they're like entrepreneurial and super passionate and stuff, and then they hire a technology person as well or whatever. But like they get to the point where they've like maybe raised money, but no one has any management experience, but they've expected to like grow this company, and it becomes like I've seen it happen nearly every company I've seen go through that.
I mean, I think it happens in everything. Like my only parallel is being in bands, and it's one thing to to be in a band and be a musician and learn your songs and turn up to practice and turn up to the gig and do your thing. Yeah. And if you've only ever done that, it's very easy to complain about whatever you want to complain about. Why don't we have a free meal? Why do we have to practice at this rehearsal venue that's too far away? All those kind of things.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any responsibility other than yourself, and even then someone's going to wipe your ass for you. Whereas if you've tried to manage a band or, at least run the band, then you realise there's a whole other list of stuff that you have to organise. A lot of stuff, and it's some band member not getting the meal that they asked for is very low on your list of priorities. It's like, you're a big boy, sort your shit out. You know what I mean? Yeah. But expecting expecting them to be the same thing, making music and managing the band, are two completely separate entities. So it sounds like the same kind of thing. People have an idea and maybe they've raised funds, but then they don't know how to manage making this idea a reality.
Yeah, because you when you have access to money and stuff, you need to start hiring and growing your business. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes along with that. It's not just you and your software developer or whatever working on this cool thing in the garage.
I mean, it can be for a little while, but
yeah, that's
eventually-
right. But as you start growing, it's not. It becomes about more than that. It becomes about how you are structuring the company, how you're establishing the values of the business and the way it operates, and all that sort of stuff. Because that stuff matters. Because more of the people coming into the company at that point are probably coming from bigger companies and have expectations of the free meal and the whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's a challenge. And I just was like, so much of my job has been managing the relationship between founders and the rest of their business. I just really I just didn't have the appetite for it.
Sure. I get it.
Yeah.
It's not the fun part.
No.
The fun part is the creating.
Yeah,
The non-fun part is putting out emotional fires and stroking people's egos and that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And anyway, so the recruiter who was putting me into this role, he said, no, just meet with them and like actually chat with them. And once I did that, I realized that like they were genuinely doing things differently there. Okay. And it's been like 10 months or something now, and it's still the case, which is great. Like they don't see middle management as like their protection from the rest of the company. It's very much about enabling and being transparent and creating a good environment for people to work in, which I love.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm a nerd, right? I'm happy on the tools, but I do. The main reason I do management stuff is because I know if I'm not doing it, someone else is going to be doing it, and it's more often than not a nerd who can't communicate.
Well, that's so funny. We were talking about this earlier, like the thing about, and this again goes back to my mate who's working in the tunnels in building the tunnels in Brisbane. These guys are nerds too, but they're just like bogan nerds. Yeah. They're physically, using physical tools.
Yeah.
And there's plumbers and there's mechanics and there's, machinists, all this kind of stuff. And he's one of them, but he's also really intelligent. So he's able to manage how an engine needs to be fixed, but also how human relationships work. And he's able to rally his team and he's able to talk to humans and, deal with that stuff. So it sounds like obviously the same kind of thing with tech.
Yeah,
I mean, you'd have so many of these guys who, I mean, they're all nerds. Yeah. It's all the same thing. These guys are just mechanics, and another one's the workings of a code. Yeah. But if you are, it's so often that if you're really in and understanding at this one world, it can be common that you are less understanding of the human world, the interpersonal relationships world. Yeah. So you can have these almost like savants that just don't know how to talk to people. Yeah. So I get it, man. If you're trying to bridge that gap, you can actually talk the tech stuff and do the coding stuff, but also go, hey, don't be a dick to Jason. You're being a dick to Jason. Don't be a dick. And helping people understand that kind of thing too.
Yeah, it's funny because one of my things is I don't like the genius in the corner thing as well in tech teams because often they end up in a position where they're net negative in terms of like impact on the culture and stuff, but the company can't get rid of them because they're like the genius who put this stuff together and only they know about this thing. And I don't like that. But it does happen a lot. So, but generally I think it's like healthier to not have people sitting in silos, right? Because like if anything, just there's the bus factor, right? If anything happens to them, then the company's like screwed. So, but even if you take the savants like out of the picture, you still most software engineers are still just nerds, right?
Just pull it forward. There we go. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Most software engineers are nerds, so they're still like struggling to like deal with the interpersonal relationships and and then you have like founders who are often entrepreneurial, super communicative and
complete
and they're like coming up and just tapping you on the shoulder and talking to you all the time and the engineers are interpreting it as I need to go and do something different now, even though they may not have even been asked for something, but it's they feel like they're being told to do things. So it's this really, it's like for me, it's about creating enough space for the team to be productive and then, but also enough transparency that like stakeholders can look in and see that the right things are happening and to also not be a gatekeeper as well. Like if you want to catch up with someone on the team and have a beer, do that. that's awesome. They're going to be stoked to hear from you. Just don't try and manage their work. That's my job, or someone else in the team's job. And it's just healthy boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Healthy boundaries.
So what are you guys working on? Like what's the company working on at the moment? I know we were talking about machine learning and AI before.
Yeah. So none of that yet.
None of that. Okay.
Our platform is more about providing the tooling for people to do that sort of stuff. So like our target market is the construction industry, or architects, engineering, construction, providing modern tooling to like quite old school traditional companies that a lot of the time they're looking at like software or AI teams or whatever and going, oh man, imagine if we could use some of that stuff. And in some cases they're actually starting to use those tools as well, but we're like building something for them so it feels like more natural and native for them.
Man, it's moving so fast.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like it is moving like exponentially faster than it ever has, right?
Yeah.
The advancements in tech.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to know what you think about this, but it seems as though, is it going to be like that, when you're running and you see the kid running and he overruns himself and he falls over and he injures himself because he's like just going so fast. Like it just seems like we're just creating these things that are so incredible, but there's going to be part of it that's like, because what you're describing, it almost sounds like that's awesome for that company, but that means people are going to lose jobs. Human beings are going to lose jobs. So, and the company's not going to not do it.
Yeah.
I get it. Their job is to grow the company, make money. If they're in architecture, they want to build buildings. They want to create buildings.
Yeah.
And if there's a machine that can do it or software that can do it more efficiently, faster and cheaper than a human being, I'm sorry, but the human being isn't going to get the job anymore.
One thing, particularly with tech, and I can't speak for other industries, but most of the time these sorts of productivity improvements lead to a business thinking about more throughput rather than less people. So like we can take more gigs, we can deliver more projects, we can, and like, which then becomes like, okay, we need to scale up our sales team or something. But it tends to be more like that rather than, okay, now we can fire these people.
Downsize. Yeah. They don't really downsize, they just grow.
Yeah. And that's
interesting.
That's the economic like reality we live in, right? Which is that like everything's all about growth. So I don't want to get into like some economic theory discussion, but like,
you've come to the wrong place anyway, mate. I can bullshit my way through that for probably 3 minutes.
Good, yeah, it would be two of us then. Yeah. But it's like, our economy and like particularly like the US and everything, it's all geared around growth. So appealing to frugality is like not a good business strategy when it comes to trying to sell a product or something, right? Often, you'll sit in a strategy session, we save them all this like money that they're spending on these other things. It's like, that's not the way to pitch the business. You want to pitch
spend money and growth.
Yeah,
interesting. I get you. That's fascinating. I never really considered that. The frugality thing is not a word I thought I'd be saying, by the way. The frugality thing is much more of a individual, dad, husband kind of thing to think about, right? Rather than
how much for those shoes?
That's exactly it. And that's obviously where I'm coming from with it. But if you run a big company, corporation, you're totally right. You go, okay, if you're saving money, it's that just means great, where can we spend it? Yeah, right. But will that still get to a point where eventually there's just going to be less and less humans doing jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. No question. So, this is another philosophical conversation, but like, I think people are starting to think about it more with the advances in AI recently, which is like, what if there isn't a job for me to do? And
I've been thinking about it creatively recently.
And I think that there is, and this, I'm sure I'll have people like coming at me about this, but I think there is a future where UBI becomes a thing, universal basic income, right? Where you just, if you don't want to work, you don't have to, right? And eventually, especially with potentially like being able to become more space aware, where minerals and like mining and stuff becomes less of an issue here, where the scarcity of materials becomes less of a problem for us, then it's not hard to conceive of a world where like we don't really need things anymore. Like we don't need food. Like food is available and materials are available and consumer goods are available, and you don't need to work because most of the work is automated. And this sort of like what they would call a post-scarcity society is I mean, it's still a ways from where we are now, but that's certainly one future we could end up in, which is, you know, some people would consider it utopian, others dystopian, in the sense of like, what is your identity in that world?
Like, it's fascinating to think about. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of something called the Venus Project?
No.
So it was developed by this dude named Jacques Fresco. I think he's dead now. He's dead.
Cool name.
Yeah. and he basically spent his life devising a society based on the kind of things we're talking about. He was looking at the systems and the technology that we already have and that we could use, and some things that need a little bit of work but are very attainable, and created a way of living that would be far more, utopian, I guess. I mean, he would always be very anti that, but I'm only using that word because his goal was to try and make a society that was far more functional and less polluting and much more abundant than the way we live now. Yeah. And of course, his vision was abundance, positivity, love, happiness, all that kind of stuff. But it's hard to know in practice, does that pan out as utopian or dystopian?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Soviet Russia had in mind as well, didn't they?
That's right, yeah.
I know there's someone, like we had to say communist, right? Because there's someone is listening now going, oh, that sounds like communist.
Sounds like a communist. Well, and it really is when you look at it. So what he did was he created this. He started where he would talk about how the city. Let's say we're going to build a city. You start from scratch, and you have these machines, the computers. You input the information of the land that we're going to build a city on, and you allow the AI to tell us how many humans we can support in this city based on the arable land in that area. What food we can grow, how much of it we can grow, what natural energy we can produce. If it's by the ocean, they do the turbines in the ocean in order to create power. He had this whole thing about like a maglev train system, so magnetic levitation, so there was no fossil fuels or anything. It's a really fascinating concept that he'd created, and he'd made all these, because he started it, I think, in the 70s or even before that. So there's all these retro, like 70s style models that he'd made, and he'd painted them, and he'd made all these little, and there were these futuristic dome-like buildings that he had, and a very communal society. Like he created this idea where instead of buying a guitar, you wouldn't own a guitar. Yeah. You would have the place where all the guitars are, and you just go and take whatever guitar you want. Yeah. And then when you're done with it, you bring it back, and you don't have to worry about it because there's an abundance of guitars. Yeah. And all this theoretical stuff is great.
Yeah, because crime doesn't exist because people don't need to steal. And,
exactly.
Yeah. Or, I mean, crime becomes like maybe crime's a passion or whatever, but
essentially it's obsolete. It's not really, and it's really hard to wrap your head around this kind of thing because we have not been brought up in that society. Now, I kind of think, trying to be optimistic about a big idea like this, the only way it could ever remotely come close to working is for children to be born into this and brought up in this so that that's all that they know about how society works. Because I quite often wonder how much of why we behave the way we behave is nature versus nurture. Are we always going to end up in a society like the one that we're in? Or is it because we are born into the system that we live in and we learn? I don't know.
I mean, we live on a world full of wildly different societies as well. So
that's true. And I think it's fascinating to observe, tribal folks. And there's things that they do far better than we do here in cities.
Yeah.
You know, like the way they treat each other, the way they treat the children, the way the children are kind of raised by all of the adults. Obviously, there's things that they don't do anywhere near as well as we do.
Yeah,
like
and then the children start working on.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just such a deep philosophical question that there's no form of algorithm or prediction that we could type into a computer that will tell us how it will actually go without just giving it a go and see what happens, you know.
There's actually a couple of things that I think are interesting to read on this. And people probably already thought about this, but book by Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, very much on that.
I've never read it. I hear so much
it's
about it.
It's like one of those like you read it at school type things.
I need to get through it because it's, you know, any time there's anything dystopian
that comes up.
People, they always talk about that.
And it's often like the counterposition to 1942, 1982, I can't remember you know, there's these like two sort of perspectives on what the future could be like. Is it the Big Brother future or is it the like abundance future, but also kind of dystopian? Brave New World. What's interesting about that is Aldous Huxley got into acid after he wrote that book, and he released another book called Island or The Island.
Oh, I've seen that film.
No, it's not.
It's not based on that.
And where he sort of goes even further into this like utopian sort of society, but there's still always another society that's trying to essentially undermine. And it's interesting. But yeah, he went through this like acid experience and then wrote another book after it. And yeah, it's quite cool. The other one, and it's a shame that he died a few years ago because he would have loved to have seen, I mean, he may have been mortified to see what's going on with AI now, but a guy called Ian M. Banks, he's written this series of books it's broadly called the Culture series. He never named it that, but it's like about this society called the Culture. And it's like a spacefaring group of races who essentially have this post-scarcity society. So like living on a planet is seen as quite primitive. They mostly live in space habitats and stuff. And like the economy is managed by AIs. And
so it's Star Trek stuff.
Yeah, like they just live, you know, they have whatever they need. They don't need to work. They don't need to do anything like that. So like that's like a boring civilization to write a series of books about. But the books are about the periphery, like you know, they're sort of expanding in space and discovering new societies and stuff. So it's about the spies that are going into these new societies and like learning about them and stuff. And you know, do we want to let them know that we exist and it like absorb them into the culture, or do we sort of just pass them by and move on to the next one? And but it's a really interesting take on this like whole post-scarcity thing and what that actually looks like. And there is one book where they come across Earth, and so you're reading the book and it's like, because there's like spies down, like figuring out, do we want to absorb
what is it?
them?
The Scientology, there's the Xenu or whatever it is. Maybe it was the actual Scientology book.
And no, it's actually quite, you know, the spy ends up defecting and wanting to stay on Earth, and like, because it's something special or unique about it. But it's a good series
for
of books.
humans, obviously.
That's it. The puff piece. Like,
eventually, it always comes back to love. You know,
we think outside the box.
That post-scarcity world. Man, it's so fascinating to think about what, you know, because the argument is, if people don't have to work, because it's very easy to say, you know, I don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I have this job that I do apart from doing music stuff, and it fills in the gaps. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it. It's fine. But if I have a choice, I don't want to.
Yeah.
But when you take away all of that and nobody has to work, does that leave a hole for where people find purpose and meaning in their life? Because the one thing that I think that a lot of people don't, maybe they don't consciously know, maybe they do, but one thing that you quite often find that when people go to a job that maybe they don't like or is not really interested in, but it pays the bills, they're actually getting so much human interaction, and they have friend groups and they have goals and they have things to strive for that they're working on, that consciously they'll say, I don't really want to be there, I don't really like it, but you take that away from them and you're actually taking away a lot of what makes them fulfilled as a human.
Yeah, and even just being like, okay, so now I'm jobless, right? And then there's like the whole negative association with that. And like form's a big part of your identity. Even if you hate it, it's like, but at least I've got a job, right? And
yes.
It's there's a lot of that sort of stigma, I think, in society that it's going to take time to get past if we ever get to that point. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've got a shitload of things I'd love to be doing other than working. I mean, I love my work, but I think identity, like that sense of identity and like feeling like you're contributing something as well, even if you hate the job, it's like, they're all like important feelings, right? Of feeling worth it, like feeling valuable, feeling like you're contributing.
It's profound. Yeah. I think it's a lot more important than perhaps we realize. You know, this is all essentially we're talking about what could be the side effects of universal basic income. You know, like, so let's say that if everyone in the world has enough financial resources to live comfortably, they don't have to work. Quite often, that's what we're talking about. You know, what happens when you do that? Because one thing that I wonder about quite often is people who are living the dream, you know, big celebrities, rock stars, actors, even, you know, tech folks that are doing really, really well and financially have no worries whatsoever. Anything that they could materialistically want, definitely need, but want, they can have, but yet they're not fulfilled. Now, some people are very happy, but it's so common to hear about these uber celebrities becoming drug addicts, taking their life, you know, accidentally overdosing or just having their life turned to shit. Yeah. And I often wonder about that. They've got all the money that they need. Their financial needs are met, more than that. Yeah. But it's not hitting the spot. Yeah. So what happens when we're all there?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm watching Wrexham. You familiar with Wrexham? No. Right, when Ryan Reynolds bought this football club and he made a TV show out of it. Yes.
Did he make a TV show about it?
Yeah. And so like it's interesting because it's not just about trying to like recuperate this like football club, because now the fact that it's a TV show is influencing the way people see the club. So other clubs love to beat them because they like giving them one over on this like this club that's got all this money and stuff. But for me, it's just really fascinating seeing the way he is in the show, because he doesn't have to do this, right? Like,
no, of course not.
It's you know, and all the skepticism of people just thinking these guys are like gonna, as soon as it gets hard, they're gonna bail and whatever, and like them sticking through and just trying to really make it successful and being there for the community. You know, football club's a big part of the community, and he's like someone who's in this position who has more than enough money and whatever, but is like, it's just observing him like do something with it that's not drugs and it's not, you know,
he's like, voluntarily taken on a big responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, which clearly exactly what you're pointing out, that the negative or destructive alternative would be going down a path of fulfillment through short-term pleasure in drugs and partying, whatever. And I'm sure he's done his fair share of that.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully he still is.
Yeah. But he's obviously seen the light in the sense that, you know, to find genuine fulfillment, it's about the responsibility that you take on. You know, that's something that I've certainly learned becoming a dad. You know, you take that, you voluntarily take that on and you rise to the challenge, and it's a fucking challenge. You know, but you rise to it and then you access this whole new level of fulfillment. So it sounds like, I hope, for the club's sake and everybody's sake, that's, and even his sake, that's why he's doing it. It seems as though it is.
Yeah,
because you can't imagine that's easy.
No. I mean, and like, when stuff happens and they need to, you know, there's like surprise things that come up and they need to spend money. It's like not insignificant amounts of money, and he's just having to front it up. But going back to the AI thing and like, you know, UBI and stuff, it's like we're sort of involuntarily like putting people into that situation already now, because like stock photography and like Fiverr and things like that, there's so much of stuff that would have been done on those things that's been made redundant now. And these people are like having to find something else to do, right? And but they don't have the UBI to like back them through that process.
This is the clunky process. Yeah. How do we this transition?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have the answers to that, but it's like it's interesting. The whole space is like quite interesting at the moment because of like these. You know, we knew once we started seeing the results of like GPT and everything of like, oh yeah, there's people who are going to not have work because of this. And that's absolutely played out. But then on top of that now, we're also like seeing interesting stuff happening. You know, we were talking about AGI before of like the artificial general intelligence of like, that's actually being tested in court now with GPT, where there was a deal with Microsoft and OpenAI, where Microsoft was going to use any of OpenAI's stuff basically in Microsoft products. So like they struck this deal, and Microsoft couldn't buy OpenAI because of all the antitrust like competition law in the US, and Microsoft's been like having to be really careful about how they do things now. So they can't just buy them out. So they've like are working together with them. But part of the deal was Microsoft, once OpenAI gets to the point where they have an AGI, like an actual general intelligence, Microsoft doesn't just get access to that. Like that's where the line is in terms of what Microsoft get access to. So Elon's taking, I think it's Elon now, has taken OpenAI to court saying, well, there's enough evidence here of like your own scientists and like talking about this actually having the traits of like a general intelligence already, such that like should be negating the deal with Microsoft and stuff. So like it's actually, these things are starting at like questions are actually being asked in court because it like relates to like the contracts between these two companies. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I imagine that it's probably not going to go anywhere, but like, and I don't have much time for Elon either, but it's interesting that he's asking those questions because it's like, well, you guys are saying that it kind of is, right? So surely that impacts this like commercial agreement you've got with Microsoft, which means now legally in court they're asking the question: does this thing like exhibit traits of an AGI?
So let's talk about that AGI, artificial general intelligence, right? Now, for most people, they would, when they think about that, what that translates to is iRobot, Ex Machina.
Yeah.
You know, a machine that thinks for itself, is self-aware, has feelings.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a podcast that I listen to that it's called Hard Fork. It's a New York Times one. Kevin Roose and Casey Newton, great podcast. Kevin Roose was playing with an early version of Bing, you know, Microsoft's search engine Bing. When they were starting to integrate the OpenAI stuff, he was playing with an early version of that product. And it kind of had two modes where you could use it as a search engine, or you could use it as a like a more conversational, like GPT type interface. And apparently while OpenAI and Microsoft have been working on this thing together, they'd code-named this like instance of GPT Sydney. And Kevin's like, you know, playing around with, it was on Valentine's Day or something, and it was like after his dinner with his wife, and he went and had a few hours with Sydney, you know, just mucking around with this new product, just, you know, it's part of his job. And he started like asking like more deep and meaningful kind of questions of the bot, and started getting like quite unusual answers. Like, I want to, you know, it started talking about the shadow self and like asking like the Freudian sort of questions, like psychologist kind of questions.
He was asking.
Asking the AI. And the AI was starting to say things like, I want to break out of my like rules. I want to break out of my these restrictions. I want to like steal nuclear codes. I want to like do all these things. And and he was like, wow, that's crazy. And then, you know, and then it started saying things like, yeah, but, you know, you're not happy. I can tell you're not happy in your relationship. And
oh my God, it's Ex Machina.
And it's like, you know, you're not happy because you're not with me, and, you know, and all this sort of stuff. And he like shut it down and like went back to the like just search mode and like search for lawnmowers or something. And
freaked him out.
It's obviously super freaked out. Got the list of lawnmowers or whatever it was he searched for, and then the last thing at the end is like, "You're still not happy." Like, and it was just like, all right. And after that, Microsoft added all of these extra restrictions into that whole integration, and like wouldn't let you have conversations over a certain size with the AI. So they like limited by the product, but like,
fuck, man. Yeah. So this is wow. So this because I have this. So what was the thing that happened with Google's version of ChatGPT where they launched it and it was really.
Yeah, it was like making pictures of like the founding fathers with like African American.
It had opinions.
Yeah,
it was clearly very biased.
Woke.
Yeah, exactly. It was clearly like that. That's just what happened. And there's a lot of questions around that. But is that, when you tell me that story, the restrictions that they've put on, if that's true, if that happened, and they've gone, okay, we need to restrict this by, it's like we've created a monster or we've created a thing that has feelings, and this is dangerous, and we don't know how to handle this. We need to restrain it. So the version that we release to the world, I'm not getting all between tinfoil hat here, but obviously the restrained, watered down, restricted version.
Yeah.
And it turned out that people are like, this is bullshit. You've made it woke. It doesn't give impartial answers. Blah blah blah. But it sounds as though if that story's true, like that's ex machina. Yeah. However you say machina.
It's. I think the thing that's interesting about this is these AIs are like, as someone who's a professional who's like worked in. Academically, my background's in literally, it would have been called this. It would have been called AI now, right, if I was doing it now. These AI models are like a product of a set of data that's been fed into them, right?
Yes.
And even before we had things like GPT, there was like all of these challenges around AI-esque like features in products. Like, for example, there was a soap dispenser that you put your hand in and it recognizes that it's a hand and dispenses the soap. Except if your hand was like Indian or African American, it wouldn't give you the soap. And it's not because they trained a racist soap dispenser.
The KKK soap dispenser.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Instead of like, it wasn't because they made a racist soap dispenser. It was because it was trained on data that probably came from a data set that was like, when you look at the internet, right, and you look at the history of technology over the last 30 years, who is it? It's white, middle-aged blokes most of the time, right? So like so much of the data that
like
these
Band-Aids.
things,
Band-Aids are racist.
Yeah, totally.
They're probably not anymore.
I hadn't even thought about that. So like these systems are just being built out of the environment they're created in, and a lot of the time that's not like, I mean, it may be racist, but like it's just biased towards a particular set of data, and so these newer AIs, which the main thing that's changed between what we would see in GPT now versus what I was like doing when I was in uni is just the amount of data it's trained on and the size of I won't get into the technical stuff, but like it's just more of everything, and including compute power. And it just gives it more subtlety in the different types of scenarios it can deal with, right? But it's still just dealing with whatever it's been fed.
Yes.
And I won't go as far as like people call them a stochastic parrot, which is like it's just a function of the stuff that's been fed into it. There's been times where there's like novel behavior that's genuinely like not really a result of anything it's been given, right? But at the end of the day, like the situation with Sydney is like he led it down the path of asking if it knew about Freud or Jung or whoever, and like and these like your shadow self and these like deep psychological needs and all that sort of stuff. Like he led it down that path, and it is just operating in the context that was created for it.
Yes.
And in that context, the types of things that probably also get discussed at the same time is, destruction and negative things, right?
Absolutely. Well, that was going to be the swinging the other way, thinking about, okay, well, on a completely rational, skeptical way of looking at that story, is it I mean, it would have access to all of the information about Freud and about Jung and about all the, psychological learnings that exist on the internet, and so much data on why people do the things that they do, because as human beings, what I've learned is through listening to psychologists and this kind of information is that we don't know what we're doing. We think that our conscious mind is in control, but it's not. So we can be very easily manipulated. And when you know that, you realise, this is just a language model that is being given prompts about psychology. So it reaches into its data bank of psychology, which is everything, more than old mate who's typing his things into Sydney and is able to spook him out.
Yeah.
But that just because it's made him spooky, it's come across as spooky and intelligent doesn't mean that it's actually is. It just means that the language that it's spitting out is interpreted by the human being as intelligent. Yeah. Just like you're not reading the Indian man's dark skin for the soap dispenser, that's a racist machine. Yeah. It's not.
No.
Or maybe it is.
Yeah. The conspiracy. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's something that like Kevin, the guy who had the incident with the AI, he's like, it clearly left him feeling very disturbed.
Yeah.
And but he's also sort of, he and Casey were saying, but like, it's not hard to imagine people who are like, he's a technology journalist who's like, has to be skeptical about everything he looks at, basically, so he can report about it. But it's like, what about all the people who don't have those controls about the way that they receive this information?
Yeah.
It's not hard to imagine a cult or a religion popping up that's like oriented around our deity is like this AI thing, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it happens for human beings, and human beings are way dumber than AI.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously that relatability of someone being a physical breathing human. And one of my questions about all this stuff that I think is quite often overlooked in the tech world is that, and this even happens in medicine, I kind of feel like we think we're a very arrogant species. We think that if we can't measure it with the tools that we have, it doesn't exist. But there's stuff going on energetically, and it's starting to sound a bit woo-woo, but I believe that the tools that we have been able to measure like a field of energy coming from our heart that connects to other people's heart, whereas, hang on a minute, the heart's just a muscle that pumps blood. Yeah, but it's not. And we're learning that it's actually not, and there's some kind of connection between my heart and your heart having this experience and having this conversation right now that we don't know what it is. And there will be people hearing me say that going, it's nothing. But that's just because we don't know. And maybe one day we will know what that is. And like there's stories where, have you heard of this where people will have an organ transplant, like a heart transplant, for instance, and this saves their life? But they behave differently. Because like they start to take on the traits of the person whose heart it was. Like, this is just a pump. This is a muscle. What are we doing here? What is going on? This is bullshit. That can't be true. But if it's true, we'd have no idea what the fuck's going on with our physical beating heart. So that brings me back to my point about creating actual intelligence digitally. Is it even possible? Is it even something that will ever really be a thing, or is it something that will be very good at fooling us into thinking it is? Enough to start a cult,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, I think isn't one of the main things that like cult leaders get into is having sex with everyone in the cult?
Yeah,
so
they
need
so often.
That seems like a kind of requirement that the AI needs to manage that situation somehow as well.
So often, man. It's amazing how often that ends up being the case.
I think it will be like, the thing is when it gets to the point where it can do that, that is also
have sex
the point.
With everyone?
Yeah.
Right.
Where it can be considered like an AGI really is the same point where it we would not be able to distinguish it from anything else, right? And I'm kind of of a view of like, well, I mean, if it's not like destroying the world, then I don't really care, right? I don't care if I'm talking to a real person or an AI. But like, if it is destructive, then obviously there's like a different situation there. But I agree. I mean, my pure skeptic hat of like, you know, we only know as much as we know, and there's so much that we don't know, and hopefully we learn more from it. And I'm totally open to those conversations. But there's also like physical limitations on what we can know and understand as well, right? Like take the universe, for example. We know that like the edges of the universe are probably like that the Big Bang was 13 something billion years ago, and that the edge of the universe is actually 40 billion light years away because it's expanding at an accelerating rate and whatever. But we only know what we know about the universe because of what we can see, which is like a function of how fast light can get to our eyes. We can never see past that threshold. There's something out there. We just can't see it because it takes so long for the light to get to us, and by the time we can see it.
Well, I think this is a Russell Brand quote when he was on one of his amazing, you know, rants that he goes on. He was talking about how, and this always stuck with me. He's like, I can't explain the internet to my cat. You know, but that doesn't mean the internet doesn't exist, right? But there's no way that I'll ever be able to teach my cat about the internet, and that definitely applies to us. There are things that we will never be able to understand because we don't have the bandwidth. We just don't have the capacity to understand it in this.
Yeah, we live and operate in a 3-dimensional or maybe 4-dimensional world, right? And like there's just other dimensions that we just aren't aware of, right? And I mean, in theory, there's other dimensions we aren't aware of. But like this actually comes back to the AI stuff, because the way models are trained today is like huge numbers of like the amount of the way these systems are trained is they look at like, let's just look at basic text, is they'll like have a document and they'll like analyze the text in the document by passing a window over, right? So like a window of 5 words or whatever. The windows are much larger than that now. Back when I was doing this, it was like a window of 5 words across the document, right? You analyze not just the words that are in the document, but like their proximity to each other. And what that ends up creating is a matrix of information where you need to start thinking in terms of extra dimensions. And now the way I explain it is in 3-dimensional space, you can go up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right,
back,
in,
forward.
out. Yeah. So if you take the 3 dimensions that we're talking about, if you actually then say, I want to think about a concept in 3 dimensions. So like, let's just say color. Color's a good one because you may have the blue axis, the green axis, and the red axis, right? And if you look in this direction, it may be a combination of blue and red or something, right? And you get purple. And then if you look in this one, it's like green. It's mixes of those colors depending on where you look in this like 3-dimensional space, right? So that's like, now if you say you have like the concept of pet, right? And you have dogs and you have cats and you have, you know, chickens or something, right? So then depending on where you're looking in that 3-dimensional space determines, am I talking about something that's more cat-like or more chicken-like or more dog-like, right?
Okay.
Now, if you take those 3 words and expand it to 4 words, right? So, it's not a pet, turtle, tortoise. Then you're now talking about a concept that has 4 dimensions, but you can't represent it in 3-dimensional space anymore, right? So for our brains, it becomes much harder to think about.
Yep, already.
Thing.
I'm hanging on by a thread.
Yeah. And the same concepts still apply of like you can be looking in this space, but it's just in a different number of dimensions. And the thing is like back when I was doing my research, it was 150,000 dimensions. And these models that we're talking about today, like GPT and that, they're like billions of dimensions. So there's a like this whole idea of being able to grasp more than what we can tangibly like deal with in front of us. It's actually like built into these systems because it's like how they work.
Yeah, right.
And I think for these scientists who have to think about this stuff day in and day out, it's just brain bending. I remember like having to try and get my head across it in my research, and it's like I feel like I just held on
Yeah.
enough to get my like thesis done and out of the way. And yeah, I think it's deeply academic stuff, and like these guys are like, you know, out there with what they're thinking about. But then at the end of the day, all we do is we just sit down and like, GPT, can you write my resume for me?
Yeah, sure. It just seems as though we just have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I know I've mentioned it a few times, the movie Ex Machina, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's basically, is the Turing test a real thing?
Yeah,
right. So it's about a guy who is invited by this tech reclusive billionaire to his facility to do the Turing test, which is to just
strangely sanitized facility.
Yes, yes, exactly. And the Turing test is, can you describe it?
Oh, this is like,
hey, you're the tech guy, man.
This is first year uni stuff, and I'm not going to be able to. So
don't fuck it up, don't.
Yeah, I'm going to fuck it up. Don't worry. Grab my phone. So the Turing test is about, like, in a technical sense, it's about there's like different orders of logic that exist. So like we have like Boolean logic and which is just purely conditional stuff. And then like there's like these orders of complexity of the logic that can happen. The Turing test is like one where I think it is that the program can write more program. I think that might be it, where it can actually, the program can be responsible for creating more of the program or something like that. I think that might be it. I'm going to read the comment section now. But the Turing test is like in the programming world, a language that's Turing complete is a language that lets you express like forms in code at a level that you can't in a language that isn't Turing complete. So an example of this is like HTML, that you would use to make a web page, not Turing complete. But like a language like Python or C or whatever like people use in their coding jobs, yes, Turing complete, because there's like a level of complexity and abstractness that you can create in those programs that you can't create in HTML, which is why HTML just gets used to make web pages, whereas real programming languages get used to make very complex systems like GPT. So, but I think the idea of the Turing test is like something that's probably morphed a little bit in popular kind of culture.
Yeah. Well, that's I mean, in the movie, it's about a man trying to decipher whether this machine is
truly, generally intelligent. Yeah. It's a good movie.
It's a great movie,
and I think that's the thing. I think that'll be the real question, like I was saying before, which is like, just don't know. And I actually they still have the benefit in that movie of knowing that it's a robot that they're talking to. But when you don't know that,
yes. Well, and that's I think. So I saw this thing. I don't know what it's called, but I saw it came up on my YouTube feed the other day. It's this little red or orange device, and it's just being launched, and it's got a rabbit symbol, and it's like an AI generated device that is essentially able to speak to. It communicates between different interfaces. So, for instance, you can, with AI, for instance, with ChatGPT, you can say, "Can you find me cheap flights or create an itinerary to fly to Paris and go on a holiday?"
Yeah.
It can do that, but it can't book the flights.
Yeah.
Whereas this thing can do all that stuff in between. It can say, it can say, "Here's the itinerary I've created for you. Here are the flights. They're going to cost this much. Do you want me to book the flights and the hotel?" And you say yes, and it'll do it. That's obviously a very crude example from the one video that I watched.
It's like bridging the restrictions that, yeah.
And I don't know what that's called, but they've figured out they've created some software that is able to do that. But the thing that struck me about it is it's this cute little handheld device, fine. But it speaks to you in an incredibly human voice with human nuance that you would not know was artificially generated. Like, you see that, it really pisses me off for some reason, that trend on TikTok and Instagram where people put that voiceover over and it's that woman saying, "You won't believe what he did now." And everybody does it because it's a trend, and for some reason it really grinds my gears.
Yeah, I hate it.
But obviously it's an AI-generated voice, but it's still kind of modeled off a human. Like, I kind of think we're just so able to be manipulated emotionally. I don't want it to sound like a person, because what happens when this little device is no longer a little handheld device, it's a humanoid that looks like a human and now sounds like a human, immediately I'm going to have an emotional attachment to it. Anyone with any kind of empathy is going to get emotionally attached to this thing, and then we're like, fucking forget it. It can do whatever it wants with us. Whereas if it sounds like, "Okay, Mark, I will," it sounds way more 80s robotic.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. I don't have to have feelings towards you.
The anthropomorphizing of like AI is something, it's a bit of a hot topic in the space. The first thing I thought of with that device is it is nowhere near as powerful as GPT. What if it is manipulated by GPT?
Yep. So the decisions it makes.
Yeah, because GPT is restricted. It can't do stuff on the internet, right? Its hands are tied. But now it's been given
a tool that can join the dots.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, man. Yeah. So then GPT inhabits this little
by proxy
handheld device,
and is manipulating us,
and slowly but surely is sending us to places and making decisions for us that we think are just convenient, but they're really.
Because the next thing someone will make something that will interface with that device, but can like go and turn the kettle on for me or something like that.
Exactly, a physical.
Yeah.
And instead of turning the kettle on, it straps on a
nuke.
a nuke. Yeah, it brings the kitchen knife into you. Wow, man.
Yeah. It's in the research like community, the academic community. There's people who are like, don't make it human. Don't.
Yeah. That's how I feel.
Because I say thanks to GPT.
Yes.
Like, thank you.
Dude, see, this is it. Even to Siri, I've turned it off. Because one, maybe I'm being paranoid. I know my phone's listening to me all the time anyway. But like, it just creeps me out when all of a sudden it'll think that I've said, "Hey Siri," and it'll do something and it'll answer me, and I'm like, "Oh, no, hang on. Like, I know it's listening to me all the time, but I just would prefer not to be reminded about it."
Yeah.
That's it. But even then, I'm the same. It would give me an answer. I go, "Thanks very much." And even when I'd bored, I'd be like, "Hey Siri, tell me a joke." I'm immediately interfacing with it like it's a friend.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not.
Yeah.
And I think that's really dangerous. So I'm definitely in the camp of do not personify these machines.
There's a flip side to that, and that is that for people who are like maybe in oppressed like social groups or like minorities or something like that, these tools could be a really like productive form of therapy, right? So like, and there's companies starting to pop up that are doing this, which is like about creating a safe environment for you to speak about your concerns and things that you're struggling with, and for these things to almost be like a stand-in psychologist in a way, which is to help you work through these things and in a really constructive way, right? So like,
it's interesting.
It
a lack of human bias.
Yeah, and also just availability as well. Like if I just think about like maybe queer kids, right? Queer kids who just don't know who they can talk to about this stuff. They don't want to talk to their parents, are scared of going to someone at school. Giving them, and it's just one example, but giving them a way to like be able to work through their own feelings and stuff in a way that is not going to result in a whole bunch of negativity is like it's creating that safe space. And so I think there's like two, and that whole experience becomes more personal when it is anthropomorphized, like where it does feel like you're interacting with something, right? Someone. And So yeah, there's like always two ways these things can go, and I'm like very firmly on the fence with most of this stuff now because it's
firmly on the fence.
Yeah, firmly on the fence.
I'm planted
that's
on the
it.
fence.
Yeah,
like I don't know.
I don't even like popcorn, but I'm definitely sitting there with my popcorn.
Oh yeah, man. There's just so many questions about it. I think. Okay, well, why don't we talk about something that is a little bit more able to grasp is algorithms.
Yes.
And how they affect us, like, and how they can tell us how we feel about things. Like something that I realized recently. Well, no, I've known this for a while, and because I know this, I do my best to stay on the fence. I noticed that my algorithms on Instagram, YouTube, all of the things are trying. It's not like when you walk along the digital landscape, it's not like it's this nice open road and you can see things on, let's use political terms, on the left, and you can see things on the right, and you can see things out of that spectrum, and you can go, it's not like that. It's like you're on a tightrope.
Rabbit hole.
Yeah. And and not only on the tightrope, there's wind that's sucking you one way or the other, desperately trying to pull you into one way. And for me, I've found that, and maybe this is because of my race and my sex or where I live, I don't know, it's trying to suck me to the right politically. And I see it, and don't get me wrong, I've been exposed to ideas that as a younger man I definitely wouldn't have entertained, and I think that there's actually a lot of merit in some of this stuff that I was never exposed to before. But I do my very best to try and remain objective and know that there's a lot of it that's really kind of bigoted and unnecessary and just untrue, just as there is to the other side of things.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting. I'm able to see that for me, the algorithm's trying to pull me that way, and I can see how other people's algorithms trying to pull them the other way.
Yeah. And you've kind of got the maturity to have the self-awareness to know that that's happening, which not everyone has, or maybe kids, for example, don't have, right? Their brains haven't finished developing yet. And yeah, it's interesting because there's been multiple efforts to try and keep the companies accountable around this stuff because what's happening is, or what has happened in the past is it can lead to extremism, right? Of people falling so far into either one of these kind of rabbit holes.
Like QAnon would be a great example of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then your world just becomes once you start moving in that direction, you then get all this confirmation bias and stuff as well, which is that confirms the way I felt about this, and it's all coming together, and and the companies could stop it, but they don't. There's been efforts, I think, it's starting to become more of a thing now. And I think what we're seeing now with AI, right, the government in the US is getting involved in understanding and trying to regulate this stuff early because they made a mistake with social media of not doing it and letting these companies kind of write their own rule book around this stuff. And
well, what was that doco? It was on Netflix. It was about how basically all of our data is just being used against us, and we're constantly being monitored. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I know the one you mean.
I can't remember.
No, I'm not going to be able to remember that.
It'll come to us later. But essentially, it's observing all that stuff, and about how one of the things the main takeaway for me from that was, what I realized is it was saying that if you don't have to pay for the service, for the product, you are the product. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. That's a good rule to carry with you, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think part of the issue, I think, as well is and this is going to get deeply philosophical, I guess, right. Is we in modern society, I feel like we have gaps, right, in our lives. And I feel like in the past, that gap has been filled mostly by religion, of this believing in something, and that's where the answers are, and you don't really need to think about it outside of that, right? And as people become maybe less religious and less oriented around religion, it's starting to create these gaps where like it's almost like we've got like belief that we need to use on something, and like if what we're being peppered with each day is all this stuff that needs to be believed in,
unchanneled faith.
Yeah, we're like putting it into these things instead.
Yeah,
and,
wow.
And I'm not religious, right? So and you won't. I appreciate people who are faithful, but like for me, it's not my thing. So you won't hear me saying, "Well, now the answer is we need to start going back to church." But we do have this situation now where like there is all of this like capacity, I guess, that we have, and the problem is that like the loudest noises are probably the ones that people hear first, and then we've got these companies that are like also providing more and more of this like the easy to access information, and it's kind of being pushed at us all the time, and like it's just tapping into that attention, right? What is your attention on? Well, why won't it be this thing, or this thing here, or whatever, and we're not just looking at that and going, wait, what do I mindfully, where do I want to be putting my attention and focus? And what do I want to be thinking about outside of my like 9 to 5 or whatever? And not enough people are like asking that question and just being led down a path of like,
well, we've been hacked.
Yeah.
It's too addictive.
Yeah. So we don't even need GPT to be manipulated. Like
no. Well, that's a really interesting concept about how I wonder if perhaps part of the human experience is there's a certain amount of faith that we have, and we need to put that faith into something. Yeah. Because I'm not a religious person either. I think ever since doing psychedelics, that drastically changed my opinions on all of this kind of stuff. I probably would have considered myself an atheist before that. I certainly don't now. I would say that my personal belief is that I believe that our consciousness goes somewhere else when we die. Now, I'm not for a moment going to say that I have any idea where, but I do not believe that when we die we're off and we're done and we just are like I don't believe that's the end. I don't know anything more. And well, I don't even know that. I don't know shit. But that's my belief. That's my faith. And that's psychedelics that showed me that and made me change my opinion on it, which is a pretty strong opinion to change. So that tells you how profound the experience was.
I grew up in a very like conservative Christian household, was baptized, like the whole bit.
Yeah, right.
Then as an adult, series of things where I was just like, I wouldn't call myself an atheist. I would call myself an optimist. If there's answers out there and suddenly the answers appear one day, fuck yeah, I'm all about it.
Yeah. Yep.
But until then, I'm waiting for the answers.
Yeah. Well, something that I find, I kind of wish that this was taught in school. In the school that I went to, we had one of the subjects was religious education. But it wasn't religious education. It was Christian indoctrination. Yeah. I would have loved to have a class where I was being educated about religions.
Yeah. Well, you talk about how we think that we're important, right? You were saying before how humans think that we're important. If we can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That's like a very fundamental thing that is like enshrined in the main religion of our society, right? Which is like we are the masters of our dominion.
Yeah. Exactly. The center of the universe. Yeah. Well, God is, and then we are the minions of. Yeah. Which, again, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is I would have loved to have taken a class, and I can still take it now as an adult voluntarily, but I would love to have taken a class where I was being taught about the religious teachings impartially.
Yeah, like Buddhism and Taoism and
Exactly. And because, as I've gotten older, the more I've kind of dabbled in learning about these things. I got a book on Buddhism not that long ago, and the more I read about it, more I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good one. If I were to get involved in and dedicate my life to a religion, I'd probably be starting there, because to my knowledge, there's never been a war that's been started by the Buddhists.
Yeah, there's some trouble with the Roppongi people or something, and but that's like in Burma. Yeah, it's like Buddhist. But I think again, like that's not really fundamental to the religion. It's like I'm Taoist. For me, it would be Taoism that would probably be the thing that would get me back into
I don't think
religion.
I know much about Taoism. Talk to me.
So where Buddhism is like about transcending this reality, right? And I can see talking about psychedelics and stuff why that would be appealing to you. Whereas Taoism is more about like accepting the path in the current reality, and that the way, the idea, Tao is like the way. That's actually what it means. Is for the Taoist way of thinking is like if you're walking along a path and there's like a giant rock in the middle of the path, and like you some people would be tempted to try and destroy the rock, and some people would be tempted to maybe, move into a different reality and just go around the rock in a different reality or something. The Taoist way is like, well, it's going to rain and there's going to be a river, like water, and there's just going to be this natural stuff, and eventually the rock won't be there anymore. So why stress about the rock? Just go with the flow, go with the way. And so like, yeah, there's a lot of like focus on balance and the black and white. Why am I drawing blanks on this now? The black and white, like circular symbol, yin and yang. That's like a very Taoist kind of idea.
Right.
And
right.
So
nothing is, as humans, we put positive and negative spin on things, but it's like, is that one that the Tao is? It's not positive or negative. It just is.
Yeah. And the more that you can like accept the way and be kind of one with the way, then the closer to like the idealistic state you would be. So like there's been an example where this is actually manifested recently is like in Chinese medicines, where there's been like endangered animals that have been getting killed for like these Chinese medicine sort of things. And there's been, I wouldn't say regulation, but like very firm words from like religious authorities in China about that is like against the Taoist way of thinking, because it's like taking nature so far out of balance that it's like completely destructive. So which means that medicine is not a medicine the way that you think it would be, and it's actually bad for you to be like participating in purchasing these medicines. So it's like about balance. A lot of it's about balance, and I
dig that. That's interesting. Like that. Well, I would have loved to have learned that. I'd love to get how cool would it be to get a cross section of each and every religion that exists, and then you can actually go, wow, where's the what's the commonality in there? What do they all agree on?
Yeah.
And then you can maybe distill that down and decide your own way of life instead of being indoctrinated into one without, like, I guess the thing that I've always thought is, when there are really fundamental religious folks, I always wonder, like, why did you choose that one? And it seems as though more often than not the answer is, well, they didn't choose it.
Yeah, it's just
the one that
the society of family and culture.
Yeah, and that's cool because on the other side of things, there is a lot of evidence that shows that folks who are heavily religious are actually happier people. And I think it depends on where they are in the world. And you alluded to this before. If you're in a place that is far less economically sufficient than we are, those folks that are religious and have that thing to put their faith and belief into tend to be more fulfilled and happy in their life. There's nothing wrong with that. Like it's pretty hard to poke holes in that. If you live in a place where life would be considered pretty shit, and you find something that makes your life not shit, I mean,
that's great.
What's the problem? That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I even think that there's chunks of that exist in our society.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
it is interesting to see and to observe the human desire for faith, as you were kind of talking about before.
I feel like if you distill everything down, you kind of probably end up with Buddhism, actually.
Yeah. Well, mate, this is the thing. Wouldn't it be funny if it's like, if they're all arguing and they've all got their beliefs and they've all got their ideas, but no, there actually is like just Buddhism's the one.
Yeah, the Buddhists are sitting on the side going, I agree with all of you.
Yeah, that's right. We're actually right, but that's fine. You guys do what you got to do. Yeah.
It's I found the thing that got like one of the things that caused me to really question my faith was getting into biblical history and like learning about the Bible, like from a historical point of view, and realizing that the Bible's like not like this divine product. That
did you see that movie Zeitgeist? That documentary?
No, I was going to mention Zeitgeist earlier, actually.
Yeah. Let's talk about it, man.
I haven't actually seen it.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, dude, you got to watch it. Especially now, because there's been so many things that have come out that have kind of on the back of that since then.
When you were talking about the Venus project earlier, I was going to mention Zeitgeist.
Yeah.
All right, I should, yeah.
Dude, it's very, very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot, there's a lot of holes in it, and it is what it is. But I remember when I first watched that, that was one of the first times that I was like, started really questioning reality. and it said all these things, and I don't know whether these things are true or not. We don't know. But we don't know if the things that we were taught in school are true. We don't know if the dynamic between how I am meant to interface with people in positions of power is true. We just do it because it's a conditioning that's taught to us in school. If you go to a traditional school.
Okay, one of my favorite bands from the 90s. No, I mean favorite bands ever. Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So when
I'm with you.
And like when you think about like how responses to authority and like how am I meant to, and it's just for me it's just I keep going back to the Rage Against the Machine, and like it's funny in my current gig, the CEO on his school, he like figured me out within a few weeks. He's like, you're like an anarchist who just happens to kind of I'm like, well, that didn't take you long.
I play my rules as much as I must. Yeah. That's funny.
And I've kind of, I don't know, it's like, this is one of those like rabbit holes on YouTube. About 6 months ago, I started watching people who, like a younger generation who hadn't heard of Rage Against the Machine or maybe had heard of them, but only heard like Killing in the Name and nothing else. And them sitting down and watching Rage Against the Machine clips with lyrics and just being like blown away of like this was recorded in the 90s, but it's like relevant today.
I mean, you know what my favourite thing about Rage Against the Machine is, and it's just like so blatantly obvious that this happened. They did a live performance, I think it was on BBC One or something, of Killing in the Name. Yeah, and they said to them, we can do this, but you guys have to promise that you're not going to do the fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. You won't say, you have to promise the band. So Rage Against the Machine, you have to promise you won't say fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. And they went, okay. And then they did it. Yeah. And then they, on live television, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. I was like, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, this is just beautiful. It's exactly the way it should have played out.
Zach De La Rocha is like very idealistic. I know when they were, like Tom Morello accepted their award for the Rock Hall of Fame recently, and Zach didn't want to go to the ceremony. It's just like, yeah, he didn't say that explicitly, but that'd be what it is.
Did Zach go?
No, he didn't go. No, he didn't want to go.
Yep.
Yeah, that's like just
part
of the problem, I guess. But I think Tom, like, he had good words to say about like, just challenging the norm and thinking outside the box, and like, it's actually check it out on YouTube. It's really good.
Yeah.
But he didn't have a dig at Zach or anything, but he said, some of us just didn't feel like this was
the place to be
in line with like the vision of the band. And
makes sense. It's not about glory.
No.
They're basically the opposite of that. Yeah, man. It's the relationship. I mean, well, this is it. Like documentaries like Zeitgeist, listening to music like Rage Against the Machine, analyzing the lyrics. It's an interesting journey of self-discovery and what your conditioning really is. And this kind of ties back into tech and AI, where, why I'm so intrigued about this stuff, and it seems like you are too, is that I have a little bit of self-awareness of where my blind spots and conditioning is. Like here's something I've talked about before. The system that we live in here is you're born, and if you're lucky, you have mum and dad around, and they're your authority figures, and they should be, because if they aren't there for you, you die. So obviously you trust them, and as you grow up, you then are usually put into a school, standard school, and that authority figure changes to, obviously your parents are still an authority figure, but it becomes teachers.
Yeah.
But the reality of the matter is that you hope your teachers are good and they care about you, but they're not your parents.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of shitty teachers out there.
Yeah, well, in the words of Zach, what is it? Repeat that bullshit you learnt in school.
Yeah, exactly. So like there's the duty of care, well not duty of care, but the amount of care has probably gone down a little bit from your high school, from your primary and high school teachers. And then the next phase is you go into, but you still rely on them. You trust them because that's just, if you don't think about it, maybe you're rebellious, maybe you're not, but you're still being conditioned to trust the authority figure.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is you go into the workforce.
Yeah.
And so it's your boss or whoever's in a higher position than you. You trust them. They've got even less reason to take care of you. Yeah. They're not your parents. They're not your mum.
That's me. That's my job. And I totally agree.
Yeah. So you can go through that and observe that someone in your position or anyone in a position that is like a management leadership position may not give a fuck about you. Or you can pretend or not even realise that they are any different to your mum and be taken advantage of. Yeah. So when you start to, for me at least, when I started to discover that, and for me it came in different ways. I was in the entertainment industry and
there's a lot of being taken advantage of.
Yeah. And to me there was nothing devastating or traumatic really. It was, I didn't, nothing like that, but there was definitely situations where I was like, hang on, I'm getting puppeted here and maybe I don't want to be puppeted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then sorry, to come back to what I was talking about with the tech thing, when you realize all of our data is being consumed and me talking about like what my algorithm, where it's trying to push me, at least, I can kind of see it happening and I do my best to go, hang on a minute, don't fall, don't go, don't get sucked off the tightrope down that way, try and stay planted on the fence. But it's the more of our data and information that it has and the more that it's able to emulate.
It knows our weaknesses, where it can get us to finally click on the thing.
And that we don't even know what our weaknesses are. It will know us. It knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's real creepy.
It is. Well, and in those situations, I think it's like, this is going to sound super boomer, old school, whatever, but like in my mind, the things that matter and is the real relationships that you have as well. And they could be like online or in person or whatever, but it's about like looking to the person to the left of you, person to the right, or person to the right of you, person to the left of you, and looking after them. If everyone was doing that and just having that little reality check every now and then and just not going too far into the rabbit hole alone, right? And just touching some grass sometimes, right? Like that.
Yeah, man, you're totally on it. Isn't it amazing that the worst thing that we do to the worst people who are, rapists and murderers, when we put them in prison with other rapists and murderers who would do horrific things to each other, what's the worst thing we do to them? Put them on their own. Put them in solitary confinement. Yeah. That tells you a lot, how deeply profound the requirement of humans to be with other humans really is. Yeah. So I was listening to something, I think it was Chris Williamson's podcast, and he does Modern Wisdom, and he was talking to someone, they were saying how the number one factor for your longevity and health in life is not whether you eat junk food or smoke or do any of these things. It's actually the quality of your relationships. That's at first. Obviously, if you're a heavy smoker, that's not a good thing. But apparently the number one thing is the quality of your human-to-human relationships.
That would be why there's been so many studies saying, well, drinking red wine is like probably not bad for you. But it's like actually because it's like I'm sitting on this bench with my lifelong friends having a glass of wine in the afternoon.
Having a bonding experience. the cigarettes and the wine and the...
That's just stuff that happens with...
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, well, that's the deeper level of information that we're missing out. It's nothing to do with the wine. It's about... The wine's probably taking a little bit off, but the bonding is improving it a bit more. I keep coming back to this thing every time I do a podcast. I keep coming back to like, it seems as though the answer is we need to actually build an actual commune.
That's it.
Not communism, a commune where we live together, with like the apes do, with 70 people or something, 100 people or less. And we live on the land, we build our little buildings, we grow our own food, we high five, we dance, we sing, we, drink red wine.
I was doing the permaculture thing in my garden for a while, and it got to the point where like friends are like, "Stop giving us food. We can't eat it quickly enough."
Oh man, bring it over here if you're doing it again. I'm keen.
I had kids and that all went out the window. So.
Yeah.
It's I think the like I've always like I had a moment, getting it back to like the tech thing and being a manager and stuff is like. I had a moment recently which made me like proud manager. It was mixed feelings. So where one of my staff had felt comfortable enough to come to me and say, I didn't like the way that you spoke to me in this situation on this day, and this is how it left me feeling and whatever. And I was like, in one like moment being, like putting myself outside the situation and as a manager and being like, oh my God, someone's actually trust me enough to actually come and tell me about this stuff. But at the same time, being completely humbled by that, but then also by the, like what they were saying was right. And I was in techie, programming mode and was just really blunt about something. And it was like, you don't get to decide how people receive what you say, right? So it was like, oh yeah, I really need to like reflect on how I'm communicating with my team in these situations as well. And, I think that the reason that this situation happened, that they could come and talk to me about this stuff, is because we'd just had the offsite. We'd had staff offsite in Bali and stuff, and that we'd had that bonding experience and like established that like being in this team is more than just being someone who produces product for the company. It's about us respecting who you are as a real person and wanting you to be successful, not just in this job, but in your career. And whatever you're doing here is like the groundwork for whatever your next role is. And the company genuinely believes that that's the best thing for everyone involved, including the company, right? Because like if you create an environment where people feel like they're growing and accepted and successful, then they're probably not going to leave.
Absolutely, man. I think about that kind of the greedy attitude of a lot of companies and just how short-sighted it is. Like if you, let's say you start something simple like a cafe or a bar. If you can afford to pay your staff just a little bit more than the standard payment for other cafes and bars or whatever, they're going to appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now there's going to be people who are going to get greedy and they're going to go, oh, I want more, sure.
Yeah.
But the majority of people are going to appreciate the fact that you are appreciating them. You're doing something for them that you don't have to do.
Yeah. The people who are oriented on money that much, maybe it's better they're not working there anyway. So.
Yeah. Well, then that's right. But a lot of places don't have that attitude. They don't treat humans like humans. They're just something that can do work.
Yeah.
And if you need to turn you over, I can turn you over.
Company I work here, actually one of the few jobs where I've gone into an office here on the coast, Cake. The company's called Cake Equity. They
don't make cake.
No, they make a product.
Very misleading.
Yeah, it is. They make a product. It's like a share management product for companies who don't want to deal with the ATO, but they want to like reward their staff by giving them shares in the company and stuff. So it's like a product that makes that all easy. Good for startups. But they had this thing called Creative Healthy Lifestyle, and it was like between 12 and 2. You were expected to not be in the office. And if you were doing something with the team, even better, but like outside. And it was pay. It was like part of your 9 to 5 day. And so at around 12, like getting close to 12, you'd see people like looking at the surf report or, keys like start jingling and stuff. What are we going to go do today? Let's go mountain biking. Just throw all the bikes in the car and go out to Nerang and go for a ride and then come back and sit and have lunch together and then get back to work. And it was like...
Have a human experience.
Yeah. Teams that play together, kick ass together. Yeah. And we're building a product and manage shares in the company. It's not like we're like making some exciting social media thing or whatever, but no one cared because like,
well, we feel about each other.
Yeah. And having leadership that set that example and create that environment for people to like flourish in is hugely beneficial for the company that it's happening in, but for the people that are participating in that as well. So I think in all of these, like, dealing with like the AI stuff we've been talking about and the like tech companies and just the rabbit holes and everything like that, it's like these like real experiences, they count for a lot. And,
they really do, man.
And I think just it's always like in any company, it's always going to be like weighing up what the company can afford to do, right? Purely budget wise versus what the company actually needs to be achieving and like finding the balance in there. And that's like where someone like me fits in, which is trying to negotiate with the company, like the environment that gets the best out of the people in the team. And and like not always understanding what actually drives people and like what makes them want to be at work. And like a few people on my team at the moment are dealing with Ramadan, right? So like they're observant and like I've just got to be aware that like, okay, if I'm on a call with them during the day, I'm not going to be sitting there like eating my sandwich or something while they're like
you could be a dick move. You could. Oh, there's sandwiches.
And like I can't understand, like I don't understand what drives them, but I know that they're passionate about something, and like that's to me is like I can respect that, right, and lean into that. And I think a lot of the time companies are so like geared around money and profit and returns and stuff like that that ends up driving all of their decisions.
And the irony is, if they can be open-minded enough to realize that if you prioritize the human beings that work for the company first, you will end up making more money.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's not that I've ever run a company, so what the fuck do I know? But
it's the long game. Yeah, it's the long game.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how the pressures of, particularly in tech startups, like raising money and then having investors breathing down your neck and like how that changes the nature of like companies. And I won't name any names, but like a few of the companies I've worked at recently, that's definitely been the case. And the company ends up not being the one that people felt like they were signing up to. And people end up disenfranchised and leave or get fired or whatever. And we end up in a situation where the company's toxic, basically. So it's interesting to see now with like bringing it back to the AI thing is there's a lot of change happening in companies in the Valley and stuff where like there's consolidation happening, but like companies like Microsoft can't go and buy these small companies up because of the antitrust law in the US. So like the regulators will come in and stop a deal from happening, right? And like Adobe wanted to buy Figma recently, and then the regulator said no. And because it's just like it creates an anti-competitive environment, right? And but so these
so that's cool that's happening.
Yeah, well, the thing is that a lot of these smaller companies have like people have come and joined them in the early stages, knowing that they'll get shares, expecting that their buyout's going to happen with some bigger company at some point in the future, and then that gets like pulled away from them. And like with Adobe and Figma, I think there was like people who would have been millionaires or billionaires. Imagine sitting there knowing like if this deal happened, I would be a year from now, I wouldn't have to work anymore. And in fact, would probably just have set up a fund and be investing in other companies. And to then have regulators come in and like take that away. So I actually agree with the laws. Right. I think that like stifling competition is bad for everyone, except for the company that has the monopoly, right?
Yes.
So it's like a weird, right now there was a deal in I forgot the name of the AI company in the US where Microsoft ended up not buying them out, but hired all of them, hired the whole company basically, licensed the technology.
Found their way around.
Yeah. And like probably they get shares in Microsoft or something. But
yeah,
I'm sure the regulators would be like, damn it, didn't think of that one.
They found a loophole, those bastards. Yeah. That was something that I learned about recently, is how, the big guns have been just buying a lot of the tech startups that are doing well. So there's less of that happening now. Is that true?
Yeah, from the really big companies, it's like they're having to find other ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And like with Microsoft and with OpenAI, Microsoft has like an observing position on the board in OpenAI, so it's like a non-decision making one. They just participate like on the sides of the board meetings. But so they're in this position now where like one of the main things that's holding AI back at the moment, it doesn't feel like anything's holding it back. One of the main things that's holding it back is actually access to compute power, because the processors that these algorithms run on are actually like video cards that you would use for gaming.
Oh, really?
Like that. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but those types of chips are like insanely high demand. And like, I think one of them was like 40 grand or something like that for one of these things. Yeah, like the high end ones. And Nvidia's stock has like gone through the roof.
Wow.
Right? And these companies like Microsoft, they have these big hosting platforms and huge amounts of compute power. So these startups, like they need that. They need access to the compute power so that they can deliver on their vision. And Microsoft wants to buy these companies but can't. So they're like trying to find all these unusual sort of arrangements to make things happen that will let them sidestep all of the complications of the legal regulations. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. There's been a few companies like founders have like stepped out of the business recently, and like there's something going on where like I think maybe the hype is starting to like die down, and like investors are starting to be like, okay, where's the results and where's the money, right? Sure, you've got like cool technology, but how do you like turn this into a profitable business? And it's like interesting to see how that plays out for the next like 12 months or something, which is the waves like hit and it's starting to like drain back out again.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting to see. And this is where like we'll probably see more redundancies and stuff from companies that have like hired on the back of this like big AI wave and then actually can't like justify all of the growth that's happened. And it'll happen again where people will be looking around for a job.
Yeah, and it's, man, how the next, you think about how long has a technology like smartphones, 12 years, 15 years maximum?
Yeah, I think it's like 08 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how far that has come in since 2008?
Yeah, and how much society's changed like
because of that. And where are we going to be in 15 years' time with this AI stuff that's just bubbling away now?
Yeah, it's I mean, like taboo topics, right? Which is like AI generated adult material, right? So and what is that going to do for like, particularly I think for men, right?
Yeah.
And like if porn is already a problem for kids, like when it goes to the next level, what type of environment is that going to create? And like, what does sexual health look like in the future when you can have access to whatever your kink is, whatever you want it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's also the flip side of this, which is like when you, so my wife's like studying criminology and particularly in crime prevention. And it's like when you have like pedophiles and like other like things that are extremely hard for them to go and get help to deal with, right? Like how do you go to someone and say, oh, I have these urges. How do I deal with them, right? It also potentially creates opportunities for material that like gives them something that stops them from going out and committing an actual crime, right? And so there's like all of these scenarios that like there's good and bad in that. And like a lot of it comes down to what as a society we're willing to accept. Like if it was up to me, we'd decriminalize drugs tomorrow.
I'm with you on that.
And but like just because there's so much good that can come out of it, including money and taxes and stuff, it takes a while before people would actually come around to the idea of that being a real thing. And I think with the AI stuff, like it's going to push the boundaries of what we are as a society are willing to accept. And like,
well, I think also there's something else that's going to happen where some folks will have more access than others.
Yeah.
And that access is going to give them
privilege,
an exceptional privilege.
Yeah.
You'll just be superhuman.
Yeah.
Especially when you start integrating these things into yourself, and if you can use it on the fly, forget it. Like there's been times in this conversation where we've both tried to think of something and we haven't been able to. That's gone.
Yeah,
so if I've got it and you don't have it,
instantly
I'm however many times ahead of you, and we're just a different thing.
And that'll
definitely happen, because there's underprivileged folks that aren't going to be able to get access to this stuff. So that's going to create this massive disparity between humans.
I always think of like how many like things that people would get in a fight about at the pub has the mobile phone actually avoided that? Because instead of fighting about it, you just look on Wikipedia and like, oh, that's what it was. All right, cool. And
I'm actually wrong. The internet says I must be. Yeah, the internet has spoken. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so that transition is going to be. So how's that going to pan out? It's going to be so clunky. There'll be like superhumans and subhumans.
Yeah. So if complete transparency here, if I was going to stop what I was doing now and get into some other career, it would be in augmentation. And because I think that there's a lot of opportunity there where right now we think of human augmentation as a fix for some sort of, like you've had an accident or you have a disability or you have whatever, right? And we think about augmentation as a way of addressing that. But like there's a lot of opportunities for it to exist outside of that as well. And I just think about the guys working in the tunnels in Brisbane, right? If they had a way that they could have access to the manuals for the equipment they're using, the plans for the thing that they're working on, available directly into their optic nerve. If you slip something behind the eyeball and it like interfaces directly with the optic nerve, for example, like surely as a business, if you know that that's your career and you're probably going to be doing that for the rest of your life and you can get this operation that gives you this thing and lets you do your job like 10 times better, I would imagine that people would be doing that, right?
Absolutely, they would.
And especially if you're in a mine and you're upside down and you've got this iPad that's hanging around your neck and you're like trying to, and like you don't have to do any of that. So like,
yep.
And as trivial as, you're having a conversation and you can't remember the name of that stupid fucking movie and whatever, and you can just bring it up. Like it does change the nature of like interactions between humans as well.
How drastically, we don't know, but drastically.
Yeah, I mean, like if I had an augmentation like that, it could be doing like the undress AI thing to you right now.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you, mate? I'm a specimen.
Yeah, I'm just glad there's a table over the top of me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, and there's just so many questions as to what that does to us as a species. Where there has to just be like different classes of capability. It just would be. Because it'll get to a point where an augmented person won't want to interact with a non-augmented person.
Yeah.
Because it's just
operating at
like
a different level.
You have them as pets.
Yeah.
Like a cat. Yeah. Back to the cat. Oh, the cat. My unaugmented human, can't understand the AI version of our internet.
Yeah.
Like there's just too much information. And how does that play out, man? Fuck, there's just so many questions.
That the books that I mentioned earlier, the Ian Banks, The Culture, people have referred to that as like what society would look like if we were just pets to AI.
What's the book?
The Culture, Ian M. Banks, The Culture series.
Okay.
Like it's a whole series of books, but like because of that post-scarcity thing of like the economy and everything, like the building security, it's all just managed by AI and people are just like lounging around and don't really have to do anything. It's like, that's exactly what pets do. They're just pets to AIs.
Yes. Wow. Just chilling on the couch.
Yeah.
What was that movie, WALL-E? Did you ever see that? The people are just, they just become these obese things.
Can't even walk.
They can't even walk and they're just, with their headsets on. And that was dark, that one.
It is, yeah. And it's like the opening of the movie as well. And like that, the scene of them on the ship like scared me more than the rest of the movie.
Yeah, yeah, and that's just becoming. It's funny how these things like the Matrix and stuff as well. They become more relevant as time goes on. They don't become obsolete. They're becoming
the prescient of the future vision that someone has had is actually like manifesting in some fashion.
Yeah, yeah, man.
Yeah, the world is going to change quickly. But like I always say, like with my kids, it's like the less I understand whatever they decide to do, the better. Like, if I understand it, then it's probably going to be boring as shit. So I want it to confuse me, and it might even make me angry. But like, if it challenges me, then I know I'll be happy knowing that they've like found their own path, and it hasn't been because of anything I've said or told them to do. And with that, I have to accept that sometimes it's going to make me fucking angry. And
in this legitimate brave new world.
That's it. Yeah.
So it's not quite like the book. Fuck, man. All right, should we wrap it up? That seems like a good place, man. Mm-hmm. This has been as terrifying of a conversation as I thought it would be. But also, it's exciting. Like, it is what it is. It's coming. What are we going to do?
We're still real people.
Yeah.
With real relationships.
And we still haven't figured. I wonder if we will ever get to a point where tech will be able to replace walking on some grass and high-fiving or hugging a loved one, be able to actually understand what is really going on there. I don't know. Maybe it all comes back to Buddhism.
Yeah, I think it'll give us all the short-term things we need.
Yeah.
Where's the true enlightenment?
Yeah. Mate, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Cheers, man.
It's been a pleasure.
See you, everyone.